So there's a whole legend about Yamingju, about dragons. So it's called dragon's pearl. So whenever you see in Chinese imagery and mythology, it's often got its hand on a ball. That ball is Yamingju. There are three types of Yamingju. There is ancient, which is the original piece that mostly it's found in China, deep under the ground. Then there is celestial, so the stone is made from a mother stone, artificially made, but still glows. And then there is this kind of new kind, which falls apart and it's just cheap as chips. So they found a piece of Yamingju in the ground, which they ended up making into a giant pearl, which was about 1 metre tall and 1 metre around. And it is worth somewhere in the region of $1.7 billion. It is not shared much out of China, which is why hardly anyone ever hears about it. The piece that I was given was handed down from someone within the Chinese royalty to Apollo for something I wasn't allowed to know about. But they said they couldn't wear it. They said it was very hard for them to wear it, feeling kind of not right. And so I knew when I was given it that it was an ancient kind of Lemurian stone. And so they gave it to me because they thought it felt, obviously I chose it, but it chose me. But I also knew it wasn't for me. So when I gave it to my husband, he's actually able to wear it. So interesting about this story is that Yamingju kind of is not for someone who has a big ego. It really messes with you. And it works like, again, in Lord of the Rings, you know about the ring, and everyone gets a little obsessive. It's like, oh, my precious. I swear to God, I saw that happen so many times when I was wearing it, and then people realized what it did. They were trying to get it off me as possible. And so you have to be quite a humble person to actually wear it all the time, because it will keep you in check. So long ago in China, during a great drought, a dragon somehow lost his precious, luminous pearl. So without it, how would he breathe life into clouds ever again? What would happen to all the people who prayed to him for rain, and who would save them from drought? So the dragon looked far and wide for this precious pearl without success, and he flew high and low, desperately trying to find it. Finally, he gave up his search, spread his wings, he climbed the wind and rose into the sky and flew away. But in a small burrow under a hill, it lay hidden, and above it grew a shade of grass, so green that its blades glistened in the sunlight like imperial jade. And this is how Zhao Zheng, a farmer boy, happened to discover it. So he had to cut grass to feed the animals for his mother, but due to a drought they were barely surviving, and each day the blazing sun made the ground drier. So Zhao Zheng had to travel farther from home each day to find fresh grass. One day, about to give up after walking many miles, and finding nothing, he spotted a lush area of green grass growing on a parched hill. So he cut it, and the next day he returned and noticed the same spot had grass had regrown. So we returned to the spot again, and the next day the grass was there again. But no matter how often he cut it, it just never diminished in size. So being a clever boy, he decided to dig up the entire patch of lush grass and transplant it back home to save himself the long walk. So while digging in the hillside, he removed the grass below its roots and discovered in a burrow right beneath it a large, beautiful, luminous. So when he arrived home, he gave this pearl to his mother, who promptly hid it in a half-empty rice jar. Next morning, he rushed outside to check the grass that he'd brought back from the other day, and so to his dismay, it had completely withered and turned brown. But the rice jar on the shelf was totally full to the brim with rice. So he and his mother then placed the luminous pearl, which they now knew was magical, into their small collection of gold coins. And the next morning, their gold coins had multiplied and overflowed on the floor. And after this, they were rich and began to share those in the village with whom had helped them when they were poor, but soon word spread. And afterwards it was inevitable, but the jealousy and greed of others caused the landlord of the village to demand the pearl. Since the pearl was found on the land he owned most of the land, he demanded that he have it given to him. So Zhao Zheng swallowed the pearl. And this was not wise, for it burned inside his stomach with much molten heat, and that he drank his well dry. And then he kept on drinking, and drinking, and drinking, and drawn by the commotion, all the villagers came to watch Zhao Zheng drink, growing bigger and bigger by the minute. And no one knew exactly when Zhao Zheng transformed and morphed himself into a young boy, into a mighty dragon. No one really noticed how until Zhao Zheng turned around, unfurled his majestic glowing wings, his eyes now golden, full of wonder, he searched for his mother. He rose up into the air, and as the villagers looked up, clouds filled the sky and rain fell down in torrents, and the river filled with rain and began to flow again after months and months of clear skies. The great drought was over, and people danced and wept. So what we're saying here is that a Yeimingju multiplies. They said that the golfer, and someone might be able to Tiger Woods was wearing Yeimingju when he won the biggest golf tournament of his life. So in Exodus, it says in the Bible, it says, "Thou shalt put in the breastplate of judgment in the Urim and Thummim, and they shall be upon Aaron's heart when he goeth in before the Lord, and Aaron shall bear the judgment of the children of Israel upon his heart before the Lord continually." So Apollo Stoppenbein says, "The rods of Moses and Aaron have been lost to history for thousands of years, but it is known that there were 14 gems on the breastplate of Aaron, along with the 12 gems represented the 12 tribes of Israel. Aaron was instructed to mount 2 other gems on the breastplate." So basically what he's saying is that he thinks that Yeimingju is Urim, because Urim means light or illumination. So when Ryan put his Yeimingju into the water, it designed this beautiful hexagon with this very interesting design below it. He also has an Egyptian jed, which he got from when he was in Egypt. It's thick, and the patterns are almost identical. And there is some suggestion that in ancient Egypt, in the pyramids, they used Yeimingju to light some of the rooms. These are just the 2 of them side a little bit closer up. So we have a lot to get through about pyramids, and you might be wondering why there's whales kind of swimming through the pyramids. So this is just interesting to me, but very close to Cairo, where the pyramids are, there is an area basically where they have found all kinds of whale bones. So and they also discovered that the whales actually were mammals that went into the water, which I thought was really interesting too. So the whale's name, Pheomycetus anubis, pays tribute to both the place it was found and to Anubis, the ancient Egyptian jackal-headed god of death, partly due to the superficial similarity between their skulls and partly due to the anatomical evidence suggesting the whale had fierce, powerful jaws, making it the apex predator in its food chain. The whale was a god of death to most animals that lived in that area. Kind of interesting. Now, I'm going to tell you a nice story about the whale and the kauri tree, and then we're going to get really into pyramids. So there is a man in New Zealand, he's quite well known. He was taking measurements of different things, like, not just measurements, the sound. He was measuring the sound and recording the sound that came from trees, from plants, from stones, from even water. And there is this story based up in the North Island from more of the northern tribes, where they say that the sperm whale is the ancestor, or the kauri tree is the ancestor of the sperm whale. So the kauri tree that you see here is the native New Zealand tree. It's a very sacred and special tree. And so there is a connection between the sperm whale and the kauri tree. And it said that when the sperm whale would sing or make sounds through the water, it wasn't just heard through the water. The sound would actually come up and over the beach and into the forests, and the coral tree would call back. So they would speak to each other according to local mouth. So what this guy did was he took the sound frequency and measured it and recorded it of the coral tree, went out on a boat because the sperm whale don't come across there very often anymore, put the sound into the sea and played it. Heard from a lot of miles away a call back from the sperm whale. I think that's pretty special. So there are all kinds of pyramids all over the world. So there are over 10,000 documented pyramids on Earth right now, according to my friend Tim Moon. So Tim is an archaeologist who actually lives in New Zealand. He kindly was on one of my webinars and shared a lot of information. He was the lead archaeologist for the Bosnian pyramid. So if you go into Wikipedia, they say that the Bosnian pyramid isn't a pyramid at all, but actually it is, and there is plenty of evidence to say that it is. So there's a few things that I learned from him, other than it's a genuine pyramid dating back 29,400 years, so like he's saying pre-Great Flood. He says that most pyramids are out of phase or deactivated, meaning that they're not working properly, often due to earthquakes and periods of time. If there are any giving off any readable energy at all, it's only a fraction of its potential. So I put these little reminders for myself. So what they found was that when they were measuring using different electromagnetic frequency testers, there was a ticking noise every 3 or 5 minutes of the pyramid. It made a tick. So he said that that tick it was trying to reboot, but it was not in the right position. So they found aqueducts, they found artifacts, they found ancient technology. They actually found that people sabotaged some of their sites and stole a lot of findings. Tim says that the ancients were producing energy using architecture. These are some of the things that they found that were man-made. And the next is a little video of Tim speaking about a very special rock that they found, they called it the Heart Rock, because you'll see why. And it's kind of an interesting little video. You don't get to actually hear, straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, about what they're finding in a pyramid that apparently isn't really real. So they found man-made caves inside as well, made of a composite material, and megalithic stones that gave off energy, which they were able to read, which were always found over a water source. So I'm going to sit down and play this.
Artifacts that are absolutely anomalous, that are obviously extremely important, and then we start to very, very carefully consider what they possibly could be. This stone was found in the 20,000-year-old deposit. It immediately attracted somebody's attention because it's of a rough heart shape. So we immediately called it the heart stone. What we found on the heart stone, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, a circular design where there is a nucleus, then there's an interim ring, and then there is an outside ring, through to some sort of an image in the top right-hand corner, which at the time, with our naked eye, appeared to be a visage, an image of a person, a being, or something of that nature. Now, the importance of this heart stone is this, that the photograph you're looking at now was taken within a couple of hours of the stone being discovered. It was immediately rushed back to the laboratory and it was photographed. After a period of 24 hours, this is what it looked like. So what we had is we had a stone that was energetically charged was carrying a signature of some description that through either the removal of it from its place of provenance or the touching of it has lost its energetic signature. Now, we were really concerned about this, and we had many photographs of what the stone looked like in the early hours of discovering it. So our question was really simply this: are we looking at a stone that has a pigment design on it? Are we looking at a stone that just simply has mineral stains on it? Are we looking at a stone that was carrying an energy signature? So this stone was actually sent to a laboratory in the United States of America to undergo spectrum analysis. So essentially the surface of the stone was scanned, and various filters were applied to that in terms of determining. The results tell us there is no evidence of pigmentation. So we know it's not a paint, we know it's not designed on it. That was as far as they would go. They then rejected the stone and sent it back to us and said they were not prepared to undertake any further analysis of it. So that then added to the intrigue of the stone. It's something very, very special. It's a composite material. It carried information. Either that information has diffused or the information is still present. Now, if we consider that the computers that we're using, the telephone devices we have, our cars, at the center of all of our modern technology is a small mineral called silicon, SiO4. So we started to explore the relevance of silicon and, as a consequence of that, of course, crystal. Right, I'm going to do a little jump here. So if you look at that stone, you can see the design in the lower left-hand corner. One of the phenomena that was being discovered in Bosnia was orb activity in the subterranean tunnel complex. So we'd start to find these little pieces of geology. They were quite interesting, this one's been broken open. What I will explain to you is you can see an oxidized exterior going through to a darker ochre or darker red, perhaps burgundy in the center, and then something within that with a cavity. This is it as one that we found damaged, and when we opened it up, this is the structure. So we have an outer crust with oxidization, we have an inner crust that appears to consist of a lot of iron, and then the central creamy white material is so extraordinary. So to give you a context, this is somewhere between 20 and 30,000 years old, down deep in the ground. It's a repeating technology, a repeating geology. It is composite, it is man-made, it has multiple layers to it, and it's been constructed. Some of the questions are this: that white material was heavily hydrated, so basically it was very wet. It is quartz crystal paste. Quartz crystal has been ground up into fine, fine pieces. It's somehow suspended with, or hydrated with water, which then means where oxygen has been introduced, so the oxygen can be the fuel cell. Then you'll see that through the middle is a cavity. How can two highly hydrated pastes sit for tens of thousands of years without the effect of gravity making them fall together? So the cavity in the middle is also part of how this thing exchanges energy. Here is a simple dissection, so I would give this to students, etc. They would start to record the different layers and describe each layer, and we actually got up to 17 layers of material. So a very complex object. Again, just showing you some of that hydrated quartz paste. And in a moment, we're going to move into the field of quartz. So please remember this artifact. Pyramid tunnel systems. We have flooded sections that are thousands of years old. The water in them is highly energized, and that we would also undertake experiments in there with hydrophones to see what is happening. This section here, I actually led an expedition through this section. We ended up going 250 meters. I think that's about 700 feet. Further in, it didn't appear though humans had been there for thousands and tens of thousands of years. Then we came across chambers that then had 5 or 6 more tunnels off them. So a complete labyrinth, but again, water. It's all about water.
It's all about water. This is an island called Pyramid Island in New Zealand. So my dad's a famous Maori fisherman called Bill Hohepa. And so this pyramid-shaped island actually is where all of the sick or injured fish or marine life go underneath it to heal. So it has a kind of pyramid energy. This is an ice image that used the word truth. So we're starting to see this consistently, as when we see a pyramid image, it seems to mean truth. This is a microscopic pyramid from Laurent Costel I just thought was kind of cool. So this is called the year I thought I was going crazy. So I had a total year of thinking that. So on my 40th birthday, I decided that I wanted to have a pyramid and create a wellness centre around it. I had no idea why. It just came up one day, and I'm like, well, I'm going to do that. So found this guy up north who was German, made precision pyramids. And so we aligned the pyramid true north, because if you have a pyramid like this, which was, although this one, but my first one was wood. So any pyramid that's not metal needs to be aligned true north. Anything metal needs to be aligned magnetic north. And a lot of things happen in this little guy over here. So the children loved it, and even my computer loved it. So my computer was on the brink. It was like not working, it wouldn't turn on, all kinds of issues, and it was ages before I could get someone to see it. So out of desperation, I shoved it into the pyramid to see what would happen. I left it in overnight in the hope that something might happen. In the morning, it went doom, and it turned on for about half a day. So I thought it was actually pretty good. We also found that all the little creatures, like the little lizards and wee little things, sometimes would crawl into the middle of the pyramid and just be there because they liked it. Flies, however, couldn't get in. For some reason, they'd buzz around and around, but they'd never fly in. Water loved it. So we would charge the water in there. One of the interesting things I first ever found out about water was water and pyramids. So I took 2 glasses of water from the house and measured the amount of oxygen it had, of dissolved oxygen. And the amount of dissolved oxygen was 4 out of 12 parts per million. So I took one of those glasses and I put it into the pyramid on a stool and into where we might call the king's chamber. And I left it there for an hour, and then I measured the amount of oxygen that was in, and it was 11 parts per million out of 12. You could see all these bubbles that had started to form, and I thought that must be wrong, so I kept trying it, and it was consistent. And I was thinking, God, how can it do that? And it really alignment things that I was working with people in the pyramid. So for some reason or other, I had remembered some things about pyramids. Pyramids are tools, geometric tools. They amplify things at least 108 times. And so you have to be very mindful with your thoughts, because if you're in a very bad mood, that's only going to make it worse. And so I would do healing in these pyramids with people, and I have some gifts of healing. And I kind of called it electrical acupuncture, which sounds horrendous, but actually people found it quite pleasant, generally. And so the interesting thing was that when people were finished being in the pyramid, we kind of know, because this completely free would waft about a foot above the bottom of the ground, and it would be freezing. And all of us were shaking. Even though I bundled everybody up, it would be freezing. And it was so noticeable you could actually do the temperature check, and it was 10 degrees in that one area than it was anywhere else in the room. So the pyramid kicked you out when it was done with you. But I also discovered some other interesting things, some very strange things which happened. So the wellness centre was right in the front of the house, and my sister was living with us at the time, and she had her new boyfriend, still old boy, and she was living out in the kind of wellness area part where the pyramid was, and it was in the evening, and they had gone into the pyramid, and they didn't tell me. And it was dark, and they hadn't turned the light on, they had the heater on. And what I haven't said is that there was different positions that were good for health and maybe not as good. So I called one the life position, death position. Not that it was particularly the death, which is very gruesome, but I just kind of called it that. So when I was working with people, I'd always have them in a certain... But if I put them in another direction, or if I lay in that direction, I started to get freezing and felt very, very uncomfortable. So what they had done without telling me was go into the pyramid, firstly also be emotional, and then her partner was lying in what would be termed as the death position. None of this I knew. My sister came running out. Oh, Veda, something's happening to Darren. I'm like, see, in the pyramid. I'm like, oh God, is he cold? He's freezing. So I ran out there, turned the light on, turned the heater on, looked at Darren. Darren's lying there on his back with his legs in the air, and he says, I can't put my legs down. I don't know what's happening to you. He's a paramedic, by the way. And I said, it's going to be okay, don't worry. I got my sister to help me move him into the correct position, put blankets on him, did acupuncture, got his legs down. And then he didn't think it was funny, but I said, well, if I'd left you long enough, the rest of you might have levitated up and you might have just out of the room. But anyway, maybe it was too early to say that. But, but it really proved that these are structures that we might not really understand a lot. They were real technologies. They have a power about them, and they have a sound too that you can hear. And it was quite interesting because I had a bunch of people that were just fascinated with it. I had random people turning up quite regularly, compasses, because the longer it was there, found is that no compass would point in the same direction anywhere near the pyramid. People would have to literally walk all the way to the school to get a proper reading. So I found that fascinating. During this kind of year of whatever you might call going crazy, something happened to me, and I'd been working within this pyramid and doing healings for people having these experiences, learning about water. And so at one point, I had taken my son out for dinner, and I kind of came back and I was feeling lightheaded. You know that feeling when you're on the top of a mountain, your ears feel blocked? And I was like, oh, that's weird. I don't really have a problem with my ears. So I went to sleep, woke up, felt okay, got the kids to school, and then came back to feel off balance. I thought, oh, maybe I have an ear infection. And I rang the doctors because I was worried about it, and they said, well, come in an hour, we'll fit you in, Within that hour, I collapsed. It felt like my throat was swelling up. I couldn't, because I literally collapsed on the ground, and and I managed to push redial on the phone. And anyway, the ambulance came. It was all very dramatic. They took me into the hospital. They thought I was having a stroke. And they did all kinds of tests on me. And then they said, well, you're not having a stroke. We think you're having a weird type of migraine. Off you go with these anti-inflammatories, and if you feel worse, come. Next day I was stuttering. I went back to the hospital. And so they did 5 chest x-rays, same x-ray, over and over again. I said, why do we have to keep doing the same x-ray? You're getting it wrong every time? And they said, well, because I'd been in a bad car accident before, which we'll talk about later, they have all kinds of x-rays of my body. And they were looking at the size of my heart, and they said, this isn't just heart expanding with stress. It's as if someone took a man's heart and put it into your body. Your heart is a different size, and we don't understand it, and we want to do more tests because we think there's something wrong. And I tuned into that, and I didn't think there was anything wrong. And I would not usually this radical, but it just kind of went home. And I never had anything wrong happen with me like that again. What happened was that I started to see colours around living things, and I started to write about things that I had no prior knowledge of, like platonic solids and various things like that. And I kept writing, and I started writing about, and I think I'm really going, because one of the things that I said was writing pyramids. And pyramids were used for all different types of reasons. And I said, some pyramids, they would have special stone vats within them full of salt water. And ancients would come up through underground tunnels into the pyramid, men and women, they'd stand on either side of the vat and hands in the salt. Then they would conduct energy coming out through their hands, which they were capable of then, and then they would eventually start to hear a sound, and that sound started like a bit of a crackling sound, and they knew exactly how long to be in there for, and then they'd leave, and then after a period of time there would be a combustion. And you know how earlier we saw that picture of how the salt water was showing a kind of lightning-like fire? What I was saying was that there was this kind of fire which looked like lightning, which was what developed from the salt and the electrical activity, and that would eventually become like a vortex upward, which eventually would throw the capstone off and share light energy up through the... Yes?
Would it be possible to change the microphone to a handheld? Now, we're now missing too many...
It is very... Are we able to do that? Thank you. He's down now. Oh, right, thanks, Val. It's all stuck in my hair.
It really keeps it handy.
I'll use this. That's fine. Okay. Whoa, God, I'm yelling at you now. Okay. So I was writing about these salt vats and this incredible energy that came from them. So what was fascinating to me is that there was a woman called Kathy Forte who managed to buy her way down into some aqueducts under the Pyramid of Giza. And so she went down down these kind of spindly ladders and got down to the third chamber, which was full of water. And there was a sarcophagus there that no one had ever been able to open, which is kind of interesting. And then she actually took samples. And when the water samples were tested, they found that rather than it being fresh water, which we might have expected from the Nile, they found it was salt water, which for me was really interesting after everything that I had been writing about. So I ended up writing all these stories, all these things, and the reason I stopped thinking I was going crazy and just kind of went with it was because whenever I'd Google this kind of date, this happened, it would be bang on, or scientists have just found or proven X, Y, and Z. So I ended up writing an entire book which was about this thick, which I never published, which I called Soul Archaeology. So this isn't, I mean, some people have queried this picture, but apparently it's a genuine photo. Some people were saying it was from some kind of lightning, but I don't know if lightning really looks like that. But I think it's quite interesting. So this is really talking about what I was just sharing. Okay, and this was the video that you watched. So this guy was looking for a cure for cancer, and he somehow came across the idea of putting salt water into a test tube and basically using a kind of microwave energy into it, and noticed that there was a combustion, but the fire that was forming behaved like lightning. So when I saw that, I started to think, well, maybe I'm not as crazy as I think I am, which I just thought was really, really interesting. So it's not actually the water that's burning. The radio frequencies weaken the bond holding together the salt, releasing hydrogen, which is ignited by the radio wave. Now, what you saw before was from a news report about this, and this was years ago, which of course we never heard from again. This is very important stuff here. It's free energy, of course, probably.
His machine could actually burn salt water. Kansas discovered that his radio frequency generator could release the oxygen and hydrogen from salt water and create an incredibly intense flame.
So, Exhibit A. So, this is a very special place to me. This is a place in New Zealand that when I was writing all of the things that I knew nothing about previously, at least logically, the first word I ever wrote down was a word called tihapu. Hapu in Maori means pregnant, so the pregnant. I'm like, what is this? And I thought, well, maybe I'll Google it. So I got old Google. This is the first photo that came up when I Googled tihapu. Oh, and I saw it, and that's my place. I know this place. I remember this place. I have a deep connection to this place. It is at the top of the South Island in New Zealand. I'd never been there before. But I had this feeling that it was my place. It looks a little bit like a cross between Machu Picchu and Hawaii. So I'm just going to point a few things out. It looks a little bit like Horus looking that way and the Sphinx looking this way. And if we go a little further, we can see this kind of alien face showing out through the hills. So I had to go. And you can see there are two different coloured waters on either side of the path, green and blue. This is some of the things that were there. Now I wrote all kinds of stuff about what would be here and coordinates, and we found everything that I said was there. See the pyramid on the right? So Ryan and I went, I had to take him last year, and we found all of these interesting things in the rocks. So when I first went down, I went with a group of people that were crazy enough to believe everything I was saying. we all went there, and one of them was a geologist. And he was saying, well, this igneous rock shouldn't be with this kind of rock, blah, blah, blah. And therefore, he actually thought that some of these were unnatural. This is a video. All these kind of brickwork that we can see up in this particular area. And what's so interesting is that up the top there's a kind of amphitheatre. As you go through the forest, there's all kinds of interesting things there. And down on the beach, we see all kinds of incredible things in the rocks. So here I placed my water bottle on top of one of these sacred stones, and it created this triskele, or triple spiral. Here is interesting because what is it? So a friend of mine, Hassan, believes that many of these rounded formations are actually seeds. He has this idea that some of these giant formations, like up above, the Devil's Tower or something like that it's called, were actually giant trees in a time when the world was different. It had a lot more oxygen. But actually, someone said that he thinks that's actually a fungus growing on a giant tree, because that's a little image of a fungus that looks very much like that one up there. So the ancient symbol, the circumpunct, which is the circle with the dot in the middle, just keeps on coming up. The symbol fused all ancient traditions in a single solitary image that represented the illumination of the Egyptian sun god, of gold, of the philosopher's stone, the Rosicrucian rose, the moment of creation, all the dominance of the astrological sun, even the omniscient, all-seeing eye that hovered atop the unfinished pyramid, the circumpunct, the symbol of the source, the origin of all things. But what's so interesting is the circumpunct symbol is featured here at the end of a handle, almost like a magic wand or club, which looks very much like the petroglyphs featuring extraterrestrials in the USA. Also kind of looks like avocado. And so on the left is one of the stones that I got from Te Hapu, which looks very much like the stone that Tim Moon found in the Bosnian pyramid. When I showed him that, he couldn't believe, he thought I was pulling his leg. Again, another circumpunct symbol found in the lady who was ice skating. The iris is like a circumpunct symbol. It's interesting about this idea that the eyes are the windows to the soul. So tears must be an expression of spirit. And our face is designed in such a way that in our deepest sorrow, when we cry, our tears roll around our cheeks back towards our mouth, because our tears have been reordered and restructured to become a medicine to help heal our hearts. So the circumpunct symbol was used by all manner of people. In Aboriginal art, it means waterhole. The circular symbol is one of the simplest and most used throughout history. I also think of a drummer in the centre with a circle of others around it. So I'm going to share my story now, so I want you to hold space for me as I share this. This was me when I was a little girl, and a lot had already happened to me by this stage. So when I was born with something called, and I can never say the word right because I've been saying it wrong for so many years, I just keep on saying it, but I had special type of eyelids. Not the kind that come down here, but the kind that came across my eye lens. And they were perfectly functional. So up the top right is an image of the one person that I found that had similar eyes, except mine were much more transparent than that. And this was from a girl in India that they found. So I'm just giving an explanation. One of the reasons I don't share this is because people go, oh, she's one of those lizard people. I'd like to think I'm in a safe space where you don't think that. And so my mum chose to have them removed when I was a few days old because she didn't want me to be a science experiment because no one had ever come across it. So I had surgery, and so I was blind for about 3 months, and they didn't know if I would recover. After recovering, when I was about 5 years old, I just started school, and my teeth stuck out so bad, and my mum always cut my hair in a bowl shape, and I was super awkward, and then these started to come back. So I had to have surgery again. And during the time from when I was a baby until I was 5, the surgeon had become very good friends with my mum, and by that time had retired. And he would come and see me and check on me, see if I was okay. And I remember him very well. His name was Malcolm, and he was just kind of around. I don't know how he and Mum would talk about me or anything, because I can't remember, but I remember him. And so he personally did the second surgery for me because he'd become very attached to me too. And it took even longer for me to recover, especially in my right eye. And I actually started learning to read Braille. But I also became aware that without physical sight, you can still see things, shapes, imagery, and I think it was very helpful for me. But I remember going back to school with patches on my eye, buck teeth, and bowl-cut hair, and it was just not a good scene. I felt very different because I wanted to be normal, whatever normal is, and children often, feel like that. So they never came back. But I never talked about it either. And so the reason I tell you that is because it's relevant to my drowning experience. So this is actually where I drowned, in New Zealand. So I used to ride horses a lot. Was a ring wraith in Lord of the Rings, second from the back, riding the horse with red eyes and a cape. Anyway, so I had been out riding, and my friend's dad had taken me and my friend out. And we used to ride kind of behind, up around those hills, and there's some dunes that you can kind of go around and explore. And so we'd finished riding, and her dad was taking the horses back, and her and I ran over the dunes onto the beach to play in the sea because we were hot. And I hadn't ever much swum at this beach, so we got out, and it got deep really quickly, and I suddenly realised that I couldn't touch the ground. And so, I was kind of like, oh gosh, I probably should go back in. So I started to swim back towards shore, but I felt something around my ankle quickly pulling me down. And I remember kind of going down into the water and seeing all the bubbles going up and the kind of light above the water. But then I couldn't remember anything else. What next thing I remember is being resuscitated, and I'm on my back and looking up, and there's a bunch of people all around me, and I'm mostly focused on the clouds that are going past. And then it's kind of like in movies where it's the sounds, so everything's in slow motion, and then all of a sudden it kind of like comes back into reality, and that's what it felt like. Then I was taken to hospital. What's interesting is that my body, I had been missing for 3 hours. obviously I hadn't drowned for that long. And so they kept asking me, what happened to you? And I can't remember. They thought, well, did you cling onto a rock somewhere, which would have been logical, and then try to make it forward and then you drown? I'm like, I don't know. I went to hospital, my mum came rushing to the hospital, and she said, so what happened? I'm like, I don't know. And I can't remember anything. And then she told me that a few hundred metres up the beach they had found 2 dolphins washed up, cut and dead. And I was so upset. I feel emotional now. I just couldn't stop crying. And then I couldn't even speak for 10 days because that upset me way more than the fact that I had no idea what had happened to me. And then that subsided. And so I never talked about it again. I didn't want to talk about it again. It was a really emotional experience. Until about 8 years ago, I finally kind of shared all of this with someone. And they said, well, don't you want to know what happened? And so I said, I don't know if I want to know. But anyway, I was convinced to have hypnotherapy. And so I went to have hypnotherapy, and it was recorded by audio. And so I was having hypnotherapy, and I'll tell you what I said, because it sounds a little out there, or in there, or whatever. So I said that I was pulled down intentionally, and when I was pulled down, it was before I drowned, and my eyes were open, and I was face to face with a being that looked kind of human but had eyes like I used to have. And it had a bioluminescence around it so I could see its face. And I wasn't afraid, which seemed surprising because I drew a picture and it looks kind of scary, but it wasn't scary to me. And so I was immediately calmed, but I could hear it. And it was like, why are you drowning? And I could hear it asking, why are you drowning? You're not meant to be drowning. And I was just young, it was quite scary in a way, the drowning part, not the being part, but the drowning part. And so it realised what was happening, and there were 2 more. I could feel them behind me. They held me back, so whether this is a near-death experience or reality, I'm not sure. So they held me back, and the essence of me, spirit, soul, or whatever it was, subtle body, was taken out of my chest, and I felt like I was going through this vortex so quickly, so fast. It was so fast that you would imagine that movement would make noise, but there was no sound. It was like the quietest thing that you could ever imagine. And I was moving so quickly through this vortex until eventually I kind of was thrust up above the sea. And this subtle body, or whatever it was that was with me, was lying on top of the ocean looking up. And when I looked up, I saw this circle of lights and the outline of a shape that looked a bit like a boomerang. And I was again very, very calm. All the while, the person that is interviewing or doing the hypnotherapy is asking me questions. What year is it? What time is it? Where are you? What's interesting is when they asked me where I was, I said I was at the Hudson Valley in New York. Which seemed interesting. And so I was lying there looking up at this thing, these lights, feeling again that pulling up. I could feel this vortex pulling me up again. And so all of a sudden, it appeared, there was this sense of urgency that I was not safe. And so there were 3 dolphins that turned up, that were with me and trying to help me. And 2 of them one of them came with me and two of them sort of stayed behind, were behind just a little bit. I felt going backwards through this vortex again. The dolphins were following, and I came back, immediately was kind of transported back into my body, took my first breath, properly drowned. I was pushed up to the surface when I was found, finally, and then resuscitated. But those two of the dolphins didn't make it. And so I think that's why I felt so emotional about that, and I really would have had no context for that unless I had done this hypnotherapy. So I felt a lot of guilt. I felt sorry and bad for a while that that being, if it was real or if it was a near-death experience or whatever, kind of felt like they were relatives and that they have a voice. And so this continues on throughout the presentation in more story, but I appreciate you listening to me and being part of this particular part where I don't normally ever share this, but I think it's hieroglyphs are a language, and I do think that the seas have barely been explored, and what's down there things we just don't know about yet. So I'll move on. So what did water say? So when I asked water what pulled me down that day, it showed that hand. Then I asked the water to show what the being I encountered looked like, and it's interesting because the being had these kind of things above its head. I can't remember the below part because I couldn't see, I wasn't looking down. This is what I drew. I know it looks a little bit scary, but he really wasn't. And the eyes were like a pupil with a line in the middle, with the eyelids that could move. This is what I kind of designed for what I saw above me. What's interesting is when I talked about in 1986, which was when this happened to me, did I write about what date it was? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So it was when I actually saw this, it was one of the days where they had the most UFO sightings reported at that time. So what did water say here? I asked water to show me my protector. You can see the little dolphin. To me, it looks like a dolphin coming through a portal. And there's also some really intriguing writing just below the dolphin. I don't know what it means yet. So, Atlantis. So, here is a dish of water where I used the word Atlantis, and it's got 2 hexagons here, and the earth glyph. So, it means living and death when you see 2 together of a visionary earth. Visionary is the visionary glyph, where we see that eye shape in the middle. I asked water to show me something from Atlantis. This looks like a key, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of a version of this pyramid from an aerial view. So there's all kinds of theories. Most people that have investigated Atlantis have heard of Plato's version and rendition of it. And so he heard the story from conversations he'd had with various poets and priests. And one of these conversations was with the Greek lawmaker Solon, who apparently had a pretty good reputation. And apparently the priest had asked Solon to tell him about the history of the Greek people. And Solon said, in the beginning, humans were created. Then there was a big flood, a big catastrophe, and after that they were created again. And after, he said, the Egyptian priests began to laugh at him. And he was confused. And the priest said, there have been many devastations in the long history of the world. The earth has been repopulated many times over the course of millions of years. You Greeks only remember the last one, but there have been many more than that. You have lost the record of these earlier histories, and we have those records. Atlantis, according to Edgar Casey, known as the sleeping prophet, and he would literally speak prophecy when he would sleep. And throughout his life, he made thousands of predictions, some of which didn't come true, but the surprising amount did. And enough of them came true that a full-time stenographer was hired to sit next to him every time he went to sleep to write down what he said. And some of his predictions he got right. He predicted the stock market would crash in 1929. He predicted the death of 2 presidents, the rise and fall of Hitler, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the 44th president of the United States would be black. He predicted his own death, saying he'd be buried in 4 days, and died of a stroke 3 days afterwards. In 1932, he said that under the front paw of the Sphinx lies a haul of records containing the true origins of humanity. He also said the Sphinx was not 4,500 years old, but 12,000 years old, and that not only was Atlantis real, but the full history of Atlantis would be revealed once and for all on scrolls that are located inside the Hall of Records under the Sphinx. So when I was writing the whole book, when I went crazy, the whole soul archaeology book, this is what I wrote about Atlantis, a little bit about it. Atlantis has a central generating wheel similar to a water wheel. Around the centre wheel were 3 outer wheels that lay flat like the rings of Saturn. The centre wheel was like the nucleus. The 3 other wheels could move around it freely like electrons, creating an energetic atom. And this was done with the use of constant flowing water that gave off negative ions, creating a free flow of rotating energy. Because the main core of Atlantis held a huge crystal, it created a kind of crystal oscillator. The entire atom of Atlantis was thus heated by the sun and in turn passed through the magnetic field of the Earth, which was very strong at the time, creating a frequency and a beat. So I had a very interesting conversation with my son Sarshan, who is my oldest son, very practical boy. And we used to go out for dinner quite a bit when he was just a little guy. And he was asking me what I was doing. This was when I was doing work in the pyramid and writing the book. So I said I was writing about Atlantis. You really have to know Sarshan's personality to recognise that he would not normally ever talk like this. But something came over him one day when we were out at dinner, and I told him this, and he said, "Oh, I remember Atlantis." I was like, "Oh, really?" I was like, "Tell me more." And he said, "Yeah, no, even his voice and demeanour changed." He said, "No, I remember going down this path, and at the path there was a pyramid. Behind the pyramid was an obelisk, and to the left of the pyramid was a great big statue of a king." And he said that we had this giant statue there so that we could remember what not to do again. And he said that the obelisk, which I've kind of attempted to draw here, there was a big earthquake and it was moved, and it had a giant crystal inside that helped create their energy source. And so it was, the tectonic plates moved and it actually put it off balance, so it wasn't working, similar to what Tim Moon was saying about the Bosnian pyramid. And so he was saying that it eventually sunk. But he also said that if it was to be found again, it only needed to be realigned to actually rise again. And then he started talking about our people. He started really taking this on. And he said, "But our people don't want you to find it because you're not ready and you'll abuse it." And he said, he used the word procreate. So it's rather surprising for a 10-year-old. He said, "We didn't used to procreate very much." He said it was a very special occasion when someone had a baby. And so he really went into quite a lot of detail about all of this. And I was just like, oh my God. But one of the interesting things he said is that in the pyramid, because he only went into it a few times, he said there was only one thing in there, and I had literally just been writing about that. Inside the pyramid, and I'm hanging on to every word, he said, "Inside the pyramid," I said, "Yes." He said, "Inside the pyramid," "Yes." He said, "There's this kind of bed." I'm like, oh God, okay. And he said, it looks like wood, but it's not wood. It can't break or break down. And he said, there are these lights suspended above it. And I literally just written about this, so I was like kind of freaking out that he's telling me. And he said, yeah, when someone was hurt, they would go in and they would lie down on the bed and the lights would heal them. I had literally just been writing about that, so it absolutely shocked me when he was saying that. And he said, that bed is still there. And he said, I could tell you exactly where it is. I was like ready to get the map out. And he didn't want to. He said, our people don't want you to find it yet. So I was like, okay then. And that's Sashin's story. So there's always speculation about where it is, and I'm going to be speaking with Graham Hancock and various other people in the States on my trip this time. And one of the people is talking about the Eye of the Sahara potentially being a place of Atlantis. We don't know yet, but this is an interesting story. You'd be surprised what lemmings might have to potentially do with Atlantis. And I found this story really interesting in this old article back in 1931. So the lemmings of Norway have some kind of inborn memory, as birds do, you know, where they fly back and forth over long periods of time. So or biological homing devices fish and birds do. So this guy, Mr. Flower, says that when food becomes scarce in Norway, these cute little lemmings, their instincts kick in and they remind them of where their ancestors went in times of scarcity. They always leave a few behind, but this mass of them rush off urgently southward and nothing stops them. It's like a stampede. Being powerful swimmers, I would never have thought these guys could swim. These little rodents cross rapid rivers and lakes, keeping straight on. Norwegians actually say sometimes they accidentally trample on them. There's so many of them when they go out. So they keep on going, and not even the ocean stops them as they plunge into it. And in the words of C.E. Scoggins, hosts of them swim southward until they reach a certain place, and then they swim in circles until they drown. It's very depressing. So that place, he says, is over sunken Atlantis. And then this other person saying that certain migratory birds flying in circles in the same spot for weeks and weeks, they just don't find what they're looking for. So Rudolf Steiner talks a lot about Atlantis. So it's kind of he actually speaks a lot about this. So the first paragraph refers to the first sub-race of Atlanteans. So the word, I don't even know how to say that. Maybe I don't even know if the R is silent. Well, you can read it. Not only have had meaning, but also power. The word Ramalhals, maybe. The magic power of words is something which was far truer for them than it is for people today. When a Ramalhal person pronounced a word, this word developed a power similar to that of the object it designated. Because of this, words at that time were curative. They could advance the growth of plants, tame the rage of animals, and perform other similar functions. Just as we have methods of motion in our steam engines, so the Atlanteans had devices which they fueled, in a manner of speaking, with plant seeds, and I want to talk about seeds quite a bit, in which the life force was transformed into technological utilizable power. The vehicles of the Atlanteans, which floated a short distance above the ground, were moved in this way. Today, the above-mentioned vehicles of the Atlanteans would be useless. Their usefulness depended on the fact that at that time the cover of air which enveloped the earth was much denser than it is now. The Aborigines of Australia also talk of seed power. You have to remember the Aborigines, 10 minutes? No way. Oh my God, I've got so much more to share. I might have to flick through some of this. We're just getting to the good bit. Anyway, well, maybe I'll try to just, did we leave some time for questions? So maybe, does anyone mind if I continue a little bit longer to try? Okay, thank you. I knew this longer bit would go for longer. Anyway, the Aboriginal people have been around for 60,000 years in Australia. It's a long time. So a person in ancient Atlantis would have been able to break a section of rail from a railway, let us say, with ease, not because his physical forces were strong, but his bony system had not still developed, but through his magical psychic forces. A similar phenomenon is still to be found today in certain pathological cases where you might have heard her mother just lifts a car to raise her child. So, okay, I'm going to fire through some things. If you were to enter this ancient Atlantis, you'd find it was surrounded not by such pure air as the present Earth, but by air saturated with volumes of mist with water. This air became clearer and more transparent the further Atlantis developed, but the mists were densest where the more advanced Atlantean civilizations referred to developed. The thickest mists were there, and from these developed the foundations of the later civilizations. Atlantis was covered far and wide by these mists, but the division of rain and sunshine, such as we have today, did not exist then. Hence, in Atlantis, that which you know as the rainbow could not appear. So you might search the whole of Atlantis, you couldn't find it. Only when the condensation of the water led to flooding, when the great flood spread itself over the earth, could the rainbow originate physically. And this is a point where from spiritual science you'll gain the greatest respect for the religious records. For when you're told that after the flood no other representative of those who then saved the human race sees the rainbow appear, this really is the very first historical event of a rainbow. He talks a lot about seed power. According to the Lemurian scrolls, during the second cycle of yugas, celestial beings arrived from other planets in wingless spaceships, bringing with them vegetation, and their spaceships passing over the Earth's surface, dropping seeds. So I'm going to try and go through this. There's a lot here, obviously. This is just showing the place called Tripura, which is described in the Vedas, which is very, very similar to Plato's description of Atlantis. Let's talk about mermaids for a second. So, Adapa, a mythical Babylonian figure from the 4th century BC, a mortal son of Ea, the god of wisdom, who brought the arts of civilization. And he was said he appeared out of the ocean every day as a fish-human creature to share his wisdom. So you can see they're wearing fish cloaks. So this goes back to the Mesopotamian era. And we see a priest wearing a fish headdress, another representation of the Adapa, and he also holds a handbag, which I don't want to not talk about. So we see all kinds of appearances of these kind of mer people on these cave paintings. But Lord Krishna had an incarnation, his very first incarnation as a fish. So I won't tell you the whole story because we don't have time, I'm sorry. But when it comes to the flood, in this depiction of Noah's Ark, you'll notice there's some mermaids with a little mer dog as well. And there seems to be a difference between mermaids and sirens. And we think of sirens, you can see in the depiction on this clay pot from Rome or Greece, where Odysseus has tied himself up because he wanted to experience what it was to hear the sirens but not be jumping off and bored and getting eaten by them. But the sirens are often depicted as birds rather than fish people. And below is an Aboriginal painting of some freshwater mermaids. And the saltwater ones, they won't draw them because they're considered so scary. So, what I remember about mermaids. So, I wonder if I can... So, what Water says is kind of interesting. Are mer people real? And it designed this image, which I think rather like a mermaid. What I remember, and what I wrote in the book Soul Archaeology, was that there was a time when Atlantean people were changing from being extremely pure, and then it's a whole story, but basically some entities came and they started interbreeding, and long story short, I'm really trying to paraphrase very quickly here, there was a scientist called Efiti, there were scientists even then, who was trying to fix this ego situation that was happening. And he made some device that was able to measure ego by pointing at a person, and it could measure the space around the body. And he discovered that people that were in the ocean for up to 10 minutes or half an hour or so would come out and there would be no ego frequency for about 10 minutes. So more and more and more of these Atlantean beings didn't want to be part of what was continuing on, was getting evil and bad and all kinds of stuff. So they started going into the sea. And more started to go into the sea because they were trying to get away from all of that. And there was an evil king who really was horrible, and he could see what was happening and he didn't want it to happen. So he sent people out to go and capture them, and some of them were captured and they were put into this kind of pens, and they were only fed humans. And so some of them starved and some of them didn't, but ones that didn't, they ended up procreating somehow, and the babies were conditioned to go out and seek the mermaids and kill them. And that then became the difference between sirens and mermaids. That picture was a picture that occurred after me writing the word Lemuria. We're going to have to really squeeze through some of this. The 8th continent of the world is now called Zealandia. It is the area around New Zealand. So they actually find New Zealand is actually rising. These giant insects were found on Ball's Pyramid, and they think that's the tip of one of the areas where Lemuria could have been. Also, they think New Zealand is a tip of where of Lemuria. Now, Rudolph said a lot of interesting things, but we might have to whiz through some of this. He's kind of saying that people weren't fully formed, and they were. My daughter drew this picture depicting kind of like an evolution of people from mud and kind of soft bodies, and they were androgynous, but then eventually began to reproduce. So, interesting, you would never know this unless you were taught, but Helen of Troy, apparently so beautiful, actually was birthed out of an egg because Zeus took the form of a swan, and so her mother laid a giant egg, and out came Helen. This is about when everything was bigger back then. So this guy said when studying 80,000-year-old insects preserved in petrified sea sap, it was discovered that the air bubbles, when sucked out and analysed, contained 50% more oxygen than we breathe today. And the air we are breathing now is 21% oxygen, which, so what if it was 35% with double the pressure? So Dr. Mori from Japan raised tomato plants with filtered sunlight. He basically recreated this whole environment and found that his tomato plant grew 40 feet tall and produced over 15,000 tomatoes. They were cherry tomatoes and they were coming off baseball-sized. So there's a lot of talk about giants. And so Abraham Lincoln wrote, Niagara Falls, by what mysterious power is it that millions and millions are drawn from all parts of the world to gaze upon Niagara Falls? The eyes of that species of extinct giants whose bones filled the mounds of America have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. So these are some images from some people who think that giants were fossilized. The image on the left looks like a giant axe. And here are some more giant things. So in the beginning, our planet was not blue. There were no lakes or oceans, no streams or rivers, only dense, dry, salty plains. So this is a story that I wrote, and I think it's interesting to read, and hopefully we might have minimal time afterwards, but I'll see if I can make more time for questions. So I just think this is really interesting. So it's a story that ends up talking about the handbags that we see in various different cultures. So it's a love story between the sun and the earth. So Father Sun loved Mother Earth very much and felt sorry for her emptiness. He beamed his ray of conception upon her and she fell pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl. The planet Saturn was very jealous of the sun's love for the earth, and when she discovered the dry, salty planet was swelling with the seeds of the sun, she plotted to throw her mighty rings at the earth and knock her off her axis. Just as she was about to cast the first ring, the god of the universe appeared in front of her. He said, "Mighty Saturn, your thoughts have been heard throughout the heavens, and I would like to suggest that we make a pact. I promise to hide Mother Earth completely from the sight of the sun with a fortress of fog. Neither she or anyone else of the fog will be able to pierce through it. Not only this, but if by some sheer miracle the misty veil is removed, the earth must turn blue within 90 moons, or else you can throw all your rings at her and in return you'll leave her alone." So Saturn thought about it. It seemed like a good deal. She liked her odds. And the god of the universe breathed upon the earth, and an impenetrable thick cloud engulfed her, blocking her surface from light. And so it was that the pregnant belly of earth grew over thousands of years in coldness, and when the time was right, the babies began to move through the birth canals. Earth's salty plains cracked and shook as one after the other twins were born. The newborns lay upon their mother, embracing her with love, creating the first two land masses on our planet. However, they soon became restless, shivering with cold, and they were hungry. So the god of the universe whispered to the children with his thoughts, and he said, "Little ones, if you eat all the fog, your stomachs will be full, and then you'll be able to see your father, who will warm you." And the children instantly began eating the fog, sucking and gulping it, and they didn't stop until it was all gone, and then they fell asleep for many moons, warmed by their father. On the 88th moon, the children woke up, their bladders completely bursting. The fog had turned to water within them, and they couldn't hold it any longer. A mighty flood engulfed the earth as they relieved themselves, and the salt of the mother mixed with the water, creating the oceans and the blue planet we know now. So Saturn had been tricked, and she was annoyed. And the earth could not pierce through the fog, nor could anyone from above the fog, but earth's children lay beneath it upon their mother, unsuspecting. Saturn flew into a rage, started yelling through the universe, but a deal with the god of the universe is unbreakable. So the god of the universe took pity on her and promised that one of Earth's sons would know what it felt like to feel separation, just as she did. The sun and the earth loved each other so much they wanted to create another child, but there was no room on the surface of the earth. So they decided to ask the advice of the god of the universe, and he said, "My children, I have seen in my mind loving creatures that walk on two legs that will care for you and your children. They will worship Father Sun and honour the lands and oceans, and if you like, I can manifest them into your fertile womb so that they will know your heartbeat and know your love. I suggest you keep them within you for several generations before you send the first pair to your upper lands, because Saturn is still annoyed." So the sun and the earth agreed, and soon the first human children were conceived and born within the belly of the earth, and they were much bigger than humans are now, and you would call them giants, and when you grow inside a cavernous womb, you grow big. So the sun sent a ray of light into the belly of his lover so that the children would not be in darkness. The god of the universe would visit them in the form of a golden scarab beetle, giving them gifts of sacred knowledge. The creators loved the humans, and they gave them a paradise to live in. Giant trees grew, and fruits and flowers and animals flourished. The internal sun gave them light and warmth, and they were pure, kind, and content. We would call them Lemurians, but their original name has been lost. The time came for the pair to surface upon the earth's womb, and the young man's name was Tiru, and the young lady's name was Aluka. The scarab led the way through the birth canal that their land siblings had travelled many moons ago. And finally, they reached the surface. Tiru and Aluka came with gifts for the new world, a bag full of seeds. And within the bag lay the seed of life, the seed of time, the seed of knowledge, the seed of love, the seed of peace, and the seed of separation. The golden scarab grew large and manifested mighty wings so that they could travel, casting seeds into the sea. The seeds either floated or sank, and those that sank absorbed all the salt and froze the sea instantly, and those that floated became islands, volcanoes, and mountains that shaped the new earth. Each seed took on the energy of the seed thrown into it. Tiru and Alika watched the world change. They were reluctant to throw in the last seed. And Alika was given a bowl and intuitively filled it with seawater and dropped the seed of separation into it. Tiru took the bowl and drank, choosing not to pollute the sea with the seed of separation, but rather keep it in the sea of his own body. After 3 sips, he became a child and began to cry for his mother. Alika swiftly picked him up and comforted him. The scarab was so touched by Tiru's choice that he immediately transformed him into a young man, but he could not change the power of the last seed as it was promised to Saturn that Earth's sons would know separation. Over time, the human pair had lots of children, but the seed of separation was passed down through Tiru, and every child cried for his mother and searched for love outside of themselves. And the sun was so sad to see the babies born were crying, and he decided to speak to Saturn. He said, "Saturn, you've hated for too long. You are growing old prematurely, and I will give you a daughter if you promise to release all my human children from their pangs of separation." So she agreed. But she said that she would let 8 generations of humans be born without fear. And after that, the water within them will be tainted with separation. However, since she was feeling generous, she was going to give them the ability to purify the inner water with prayer and gratitude, and allow 8 lakes and 8 rivers containing the purest sweet waters in the earth to be used by the humans to heal themselves of pain. So the first 8 generations upon the earth were loving beings who knew no fear and were reflections of purity and peace, and they tended to the earth. And that was the first age of peace on earth. And basically what we're saying here is that many floods and humans later, this knowledge has been mainly lost. Separation and fear is common within the inner ocean of man. So Göbekli Tepe is interesting because there's a connection between the Maori, so 11,000-year-old head found near Göbekli Tepe. It's very similar to the Maori life mask. They have the tattoos that come along here and along here, and the forehead tattoos represents a person's status. And the 3 baskets of knowledge reflect a Maori story of a Maori who it's a long story, so I'll probably have to keep going through it, but essentially, again, we see that these are baskets of knowledge, 2 good ones and 1 bad one. I found it interesting that here the term for heaven, they used the staircase term in Maori again, and remembering the staircase, the stairway to heaven. So apparently this man is saying that the Maori people are generally thought to have come from Asia, but apparently now there's some indication that there is a connection to Turkey. When I put the water on this particular picture, which is known as the vulture picture with the bags, the reason I was talking about the Maori story is that as this brother was trying to get the baskets, his other brother, who was jealous, was throwing and got all these insects and birds to try to kill him. So over here on the left we see multiple seeds and 2 embryos or humans down the bottom, which is kind of interesting. The middle one, just to give you an indication of what I've seen in water as far as embryos go. These are other things that I've seen by putting the water on the map of Göbekli Tepe. We see again seeds to the left, that's the hydrolitha seed. We see this kind of rock formation and then this interesting thing with a hole. And over here we have a message glyph pierced with anxiety and a clear outline of a woman holding something. The Great Flood, these 2, some different tests. One says whole cleanse, another says cleansing water. So Antarctica, this is a whole big thing, but we're going to have to... There's a general bird took all anyway. So what do waters say? So I said there, what's happening now in Antarctica that is secret to most people? So what we see are human-like beings and the living and complete glyph again. This is a constant thing I keep seeing. The chemical glyph is also mentioned. Okay, this is the last bit. So I've mentioned the word wairua, the word for spirit. It means two waters, the physical and spiritual waters. I think of water as the observer. This is the car accident that I was in many, many years ago. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver was decapitated. So there is some good news. So when I was in Christchurch, the day before the second big Christchurch earthquake, my son Rama was nearly 3, and he liked to spy on me. And so I had a friend over, and I was actually telling her about this accident. And he had never heard about it, because I was 3 and I didn't talk about it very often. And he heard me talk all about the car accident and what happened. And when I finished talking, bearing in mind I was told by 3 doctors I could never have children, so I had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't. After I finished talking about it, Rama jumped off my lap, and he said, "I remember that, Mummy. I remember the window wipers and the tyres. And I came down out of the clouds, and I went like this, and I saved you. And when I knew you were okay, I climbed back up the ladder into the clouds." Also got my baby. And it's my babies. Little Rama roll. So a beautiful story about my mum. This is my beautiful mum, who was born in Devon. And that's me and her. I never smiled when I was a teenager because I had braces. So I used to live in Japan, and Mum and I would write letters to each other. And at the end of every letter, my mum would always attempt to draw a circle and do a little heart in the middle. And so she died in 1999 of cancer. And I miss her all the time. And so I was really missing her, and I said to Water, "Can you please connect to my mum?" And I had no idea what we'd see, because I had millions of memories of her. This is what I got. So, before I cry about that one, I need to tell you Shanti's story. This is my daughter's story. This is, you're hearing this first. I was filmed on Gaia TV, and I actually share the story on that, so you're hearing it before anyone else. But Shanti, my daughter, when she was very young, she was obsessed with bats, which seems rather strange for a little girl. This was her little soft toy that's called Batty. And one day I asked her, I said, "Honey, why do you like bats so much?" And she said, "Mum," she said, "well, in my other life," yes, "in my other life," she said, "I was born," and she said, "I didn't have any legs, and my arms were just not working. And my family took me to a cave, and they left me there to die." And she said, the bats above her drop food for her to eat. So that was the memory of the bats and why she loved them so much. Okay, so this was the photo that I took after I asked the water to connect to a friend of mine's dad. And these two are different. So someone had asked me to connect to their cat who had passed and was asking if it could watch over them, if it could see her. And that one there was when I was thinking about my ancestors, because my mother would always tell me that many of her ancestors were burnt at the stake as witches. This is just going to take a bit long. I asked, "Can you see spirit?" Okay, we are bodies of memories, so I'm sharing a lot of vulnerable stuff here, and I know you've been sitting a really long time, so I appreciate your bums must be sore. But a while ago, I had a miscarriage very early on, and some of the blood I put into the water, the dish of water, and the little baby, you can see it. And it was so special, because our entire life is a memory. Everything about our life that we hold dear is a memory. The memory is held within the water. And to be able to see this, it reminds me that one of the greatest gifts that we leave behind are the memories that we leave in the hearts of others.
Of death.
Oh.
And it's transferring one's consciousness to the unified Buddha consciousness. And there's a couple sort of indicators that you are successful in the practice. One of which is a tingling at the top of the head, another one is headache, one is a small little hole appears on the top of the head where a blade of grass can be put into it. The other one is a softening of the fontanelle, which is where all the bones of the skull come together. When we're babies, there's sort of a space there, and you can actually push on it, and that's actually you're pushing on the cerebrospinal fluid. And so when somebody dies, that space actually softens, and you might have a little bit of clear fluid that actually comes out from the head. And so I said, wow, is that cerebrospinal fluid? You know, if this is a successful practice of transferring your consciousness to the Buddha consciousness, and one of the indicators of success in that practice is a clear fluid that emanates from the top of the head, could that actually be cerebrospinal fluid? Because that's the only clear fluid that's present.
It's a friend of mine, Dr. Mauro Sapatera. He's a Harvard doctor, and he studies the spinal fluid, and he says that the spinal fluid is the key to cosmic consciousness. This is my daughter speaking.
I'm scared to die because
she said you shouldn't be scared to die.
It's just like getting out of a car and getting into a new body and then getting into a new body. So it's like getting out of a car and getting into the car. So you need can you drive a car without a driver? No. Can you drive anything without a driver? No. Can you drive a body without a driver? No. So you need a soul to drive something. Think that.
Little sweetheart. We might have to go through some of this quickly. Well, anyway, okay. I know this is pretty much coming to the end now, so I just think it's interesting how similar when you pour water into a pan, it looks just like a placenta. This is an eye lens, and that is a drop of water rotated. And could it be that water sees us, observes us, just as we observe it? And what if water is expressing its consciousness through us and every living thing to observe itself from every different perspective? And there is a reel going around on Instagram that suggests, or makes a question, what if water was God? And they say that would mean that God is in us and all around us, above us and below us. It would explain why a woman's waters break when we're born, and why some religions observe the ritual of baptism. If water was God, then that would mean that God has no gender. God takes the shape of the container God appears in, which would explain why we have so many different belief systems. It would mean that all bodies of water were holy, that a thunderstorm is a church without walls. Whoop, and thank you for sharing. I can't even go back. What happened? It was like, nope, not having any more. We're nearly. and that when the rain falls, it's an act of God's death-giving life, and when it evaporates, again, it's the day of resurrection. And so we had to flick through a lot of that. And I appreciate your patience, and there's a lot to share, and that's about only a tenth of what I've done in the last 10 years. Thank you so much for being here. Let's quickly take some questions because I don't know when we're going to get kicked out, but let's do it quick. Yes. Yes. Hi. Just...
Yeah, I just wanted to share something. This is for the morning session.
You can get like live.
Sorry, just
Thank you. Hi, Veda. Yeah, it was just the last bit from the morning session where you were talking about putting a petri dish by your bed and your dreams. And I did a Zoom call with you ages ago learning about crystallography. Then I emailed you about my son Ned, who was having a heart operation. And he had the heart operation 3 weeks ago. And we put a petri dish between us. We had twin beds the night before the operation. So from midnight to 6:30, when he was nil by mouth from midnight. And at 6:30, I went and froze the wall, went next door and froze it. And there was a heart and 3 message glyphs. And I was just like, oh, that's amazing. And it really felt like the water was kind of a container for that period of time. And in that period of time, Ned's heart was sort of communicating with his heart when he was young, because he'd had 2 open heart surgeries when he was little, 10 months and 5 years, and he was now 17. And that his heart was communicating with his early heart in preparation for the operation, and the message glyphs were like kind of representing that, and it kind of held that space, and it was just really amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing. I don't think this is on, but I'll just, oh, it is, I'm surprised. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much. Val's coming over.
Thank you, Veda. Do you have anything to share about scrying, please?
Just that's where you have water in a pan and use it kind of as a way of looking into the...
Yeah, looking into water that isn't frozen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's been used for many, many years, and even in is it the Temple of Delphi, where they would look into water to see things forward. So, water communicates in all kinds of ways. It certainly doesn't have to always be freezing. So part of the first one was really showing how water communicates in different ways, and one of them was where you're seeing imagery in the water, in the liquid water, and I think that that's part of how water communicates, using light. Using the light that comes onto the surface of the water, you can start to see imagery. So people have been doing this a long time, even tea leaves. It's the water that's leaving the imagery for the tea just kind of follows suit. So that's a little bit I have to say about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Veda. I'm very interested in cleaning up our water supplies in the rivers and in the oceans and things like that. And I started a little experiment. I've got a magnetic thing that you can put on the water that makes it, they say, more alive or whatever. And I've been putting it in the local river, and I haven't seen any difference yet. But I was wondering if it does actually help, or if there's anything we can do on a small scale as individuals on how we can clean up our rivers and our oceans, and measure it with your crystallography.
The technology to help clean everything up is there, but it has been taken away. There is a man I used to follow years ago, and I don't know how I even found his work. His name is Aduk something. And he discovered a way to take a water molecule and add a certain amount of electrons to it. And I will get to the point what individuals potentially can do. But he was able to take this special water, and he eventually got to the point where he was with Drinvalu Melchizedek, and they were giving a demonstration of what this water could do to the US government, to the military. And they got a fish tank, and they've put all kinds of rubbish in the fish tank, oil and pollution and all kinds of stuff. And so it was really awful. And then he put just a little bit of this special water into it, and you could start to see everything separate until the water was completely clean, and the pollution had just kind of gone into this other kind of sort of level. It was on the bottom, and all of the clean water was on the top. And then they took a fish from a fish tank and put the goldfish into this fish tank, which had that special water in it, to prove that it was clean. And so after this whole demonstration, which included water as being this special water being a fire retardant, so he put his finger into the special water, then put his finger into kerosene and set it on fire, and his finger wouldn't burn. If you put the water onto a tree, it would mean that the tree wouldn't burn. And so he, with everything in him, could see that this could change the world. And so this was remarkable, what he discovered. And so eventually at the fish tank, the fish was still swimming around in this tank, so that we have to do something with it. So they put the goldfish back into its original fish tank, and the next day they found the entire fish tank was clean. And then he disappeared. And then, interestingly, I put a post on Facebook and Instagram, I don't know, a few months back, saying I really want to find this guy. And the power of social media, all kinds of people were trying to find him. His daughter, surprisingly, was following me. And she said, "Oh, that's my dad." And we managed to have a small private conversation. And she was only a very small girl when that all happened. But she told me that they were kidnapped. And they were taken away for 10 odd years until they were basically silenced. The technology is there to really save the world.
There's a guy called Randy Hutton I've heard about. Have you heard about him? And
I have heard of him.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, like I said, the technologies are there. But what can we do? Well, you look at the tap water, how disordered the tap water is. But you can see that tap water has life force energy. So I think that the water has been wanting to flood for a long time. They can feel it inside the earth, in the primary waters of the earth, which is held in the ringwoodite, inside the earth's mantle, and there is more of that water inside the earth than there is on the surface of all the earth, including the seas, and that water is drinkable. But where there is scarcity, there is value, which is why whenever I post about that, it's taken off. So the water doesn't want to flood the world. The water wants to flood the hearts of everyone, and it has a voice and it's speaking. You know, for us to understand that we are bodies of water. And the more important thing I think that we can do, really, is to start recognizing that we are bodies of water, and we can communicate with all bodies of water, including the bodies of water that are polluted, to give it life force energy back. Water can do anything with its life force energy, polluted or not. We haven't really thought about it that way. Imagine there are so many people that are polluted. We pollute ourselves with toxic chemicals, intentionally or not. But if we have life force energy within us, you must have seen one person in your life that can transform, despite all the odds. Water really can do that too. So, yeah, my answer to that really is that really connecting to water sources. I think water is an emotion. I think we underestimated its value, and one of the biggest questions I get asked is, how can I program my water to give me the best kind of health? We have been programmed ourselves. Why would we want to program water? What I keep seeing is that water is a living life force energy. Rather than wanting to get it to do what we want for our health, why don't we connect with it? Why don't we think, what kind of environment can I invite water into? What can it teach me? Why is it that I've forgotten that the kind of life force energy that flows through me flows through it? Why does it always have to be about healing? When I was on a plane during COVID or whatever, and I was flying to America, I was sat right next to a woman that was really sick, and everyone treated her like she was a leper. And my first thought was, oh God, please don't let me get sick. And then I thought, I need to just change that around. And I thought, well, this poor woman. So I said, hey, what can I do for you? Do you want me to give you some healing, some Reiki? Do you want me to get you some water? What do you need? That whole trip, I looked after her. I never got sick, and I knew I wouldn't get sick because I had shifted the way I saw the entire thing. So I think what we are starting to realize is if we care about something, if something means something to us, then we start to look after it. We have all of this water in the world, and it's a life-giving energy, and it's us. The only thing different is that it's not in a body. It's even more incredible to see life force energy, potentially actual emotion outside of a body. To me, I think that's incredibly special. So what can we do? I think it starts with a perspective. What can we do for water, starting at the very smallest scale of what with the water we're going to drink? People say, what's the best water to drink? Is it spring water? Is it this water? Is it that water? It's the water in your glass. It's managed to find its way to you. It's nearly 2% of the drinking water in the world has managed to get to you. This is a massive first world problem, what kind of water to drink. And that water is sacred and special, and it is entering you. It's a very intimate thing that is happening there. So that's a very long-winded answer to that. I hope it was helpful. Okay, sorry, Graham.
We're going to need to end there. So, Veda, thank you so much. It's seems to me water is love.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing your passion for water and for your love today. I hope you go crazy again soon. And you actually do write that book and publish it, because there's so much information that we've had given to us today. And I'm not even going to attempt to summarize it. It's been absolutely fascinating, as ever, listening to you. And thank you for sharing everything, your wisdom, as a researcher, as an artist, as an archaeologist. I didn't realize that was, add that one to the list. Unbelievable, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I also want to say thank you to all the Devon Dowsers, and to Sean and Val and Joe and Alan, and for all the wonderful people who have looked after me, and Yeah, thank you all so much for the lovely lady that gave me a sound healing yesterday, and for all your love, support and energy. You brought me to tears. Thank you.
If I could add a few more thank yous to that, I'd like to thank the Mint for hosting us, to Jess for helping out. I'd like to thank John up there for all his help with the technology, for Prestana who did all of the admin, which was an amazing job, and for Ruth for her help as treasurer, for all the volunteers from Devon Dowsers, of which there were many, and thanks to Joe and Alan for hosting Veda, which is wonderful. Thanks for their generosity. Thank you to Ali, our scribe, and thank you all for coming. And safe journey home.